She was connected to the vine. And there was just, it was almost as if she became so one with the Lord, because she truly offered herself as a sacrifice, her body, her pain, her suffering. She intentionally offered it to God, and he was using her to transform lives.
I am really privileged to be able to tell you this story. Well, not only me, of course, the father of the one who I'm going to talk about, but I'm really privileged because I believe I'm going to tell you the story about a young lady who I think will soon be declared a saint. She just died in 2021. And she was a star athlete, an Irish dancer. She was the #1 student in her high school class, the president of her junior year. She was actually only 18 years old when she died. When Maria was 16 years old and 4 months, she was given 9 more months to live. And that was January 31st of 2019. And, well, you watched this girl who, as I said, was, top of her class, athlete, dancer, etc., lose all of her abilities one by one over the next year and a bit. The story touched me very deeply because, as many of you know, my own daughter, Mary, very similar name, went through something very strange as well in the same time frame, right around the beginning of COVID and when all that was going on. My daughter Mary was first paralyzed, then started having seizures. We had to withdraw her from her school, from what she was doing, and basically we had to move close to a hospital so that we could be just closer in case things happened. My Mary has, for the last couple months, been seizure-free, and she was back in school this year, praise God. Maria Middleton suffered, but with a heroism that is really indescribable. I want to relate something too. This is her mom's description. Her mom, Susan, said, "As much as I wanted to shut the world out because the pain was so great and close myself in, I realized that was not the right move. We needed prayer. So Brian and I," Brian being her husband and the father of Maria, "so Brian and I sent some messages out. Before we knew it, requests for prayers for Maria spread like wildfire around the globe. We opened our hearts to the rays of God's grace, and his love flooded our lives," she said. So that was very similar in our case. When we released, my prayer request for my Mary, prayers just came in from all around the globe. And what an amazing consolation it was. But, in Maria Middleton's case, it wasn't all bad, even though they were praying like crazy for a miracle, obviously. But really what happened was miraculous. This story is so stupendous. You remember at her 16, 4 months, she was given 9 months to live. Well, after 9 months, she didn't die. In fact, it was exactly 9 months after her diagnosis on October 31st, 2019, that Maria, along with her dad and mom, boarded a plane for Uganda where they went to witness. And it was really beautiful. But, they had some scares along the way before her death. And I'm going to let Brian, her dad, tell you a lot of the miraculous things that happened. But I wanted to share this one thing that her mom related. And that was that on June 3rd, 2020, she had already been bedridden for more than a month at home. She aspirated, so she was taken to the emergency room, and everybody thought that was it. Her heart rate was off the charts. She couldn't clear her lungs anymore, and so on and so forth. And they had already performed, bronchoscopy and all these procedures. And Maria was sedated, temporarily intubated, and they thought, of course, that was it, that night was going to be it. And after a few hours, she stabilized, And Susan, the mom, ran to her side and said, "Maria." And she looked at her and said, "Mom, were you scared?" And Susan replied, "Are you kidding? I was petrified. Weren't you?" And little Maria said calmly, "No, Mom, God has this." And that's the kind of thing that is so inspiring. Now, Maria surprised her doctors, and she lived till a month after her 18th birthday, long beyond the 9-month cutoff for her inoperable brain tumor. And she entered eternal life on that day. And her parents found a journal only after she died. They found her journal that she kept privately. The first entry in that journal was when Maria was only 11 years old. And it reads, "God is merciful." The very last entry, it was scribbled in the diary because she had lost most of her ability to write because of the disease. The last entry was, "Think Hope." And they now run the foundation, thinkhope.org. Now, the journal is really rich in spiritual writings from Maria, and it really is a benefit to all mankind. So when she is, I'm sure, one day declared a saint, these writings will become, hopefully, a journal for people where they can reflect on so many things, but also especially the value of suffering. I'm going to read out a few writings, and then we're going to get to Brian, her dad. So in December of 2016, at age 14, Maria wrote, "Remember to pray for the wisdom to understand the mysteries in our lives and the understanding to do God's will." On January 8th, 2017, again, age 14, 2 years before her diagnosis, she wrote, "God just wants us to do the best that we as individuals can. We don't have to compare ourselves to other great saints because we may get discouraged. We can look up to those saints and follow their example, but we shouldn't compare. Just do the best that you can do, and God will be happy." On January 31st, 2019, Maria was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, and her journey of hope, as her parents call it, began. The power of prayer became evident to her from the very first day of her new journey, and Maria said these words shortly after her diagnosis: "Whatever happens will be God's will." In February of 2019, at age 16, after the diagnosis again, Maria wrote, "Life is a prayer. Every action can be offered as a prayer to God. I think the main reason why I don't know how I feel about everything that's going on, and the fact that I'm surprisingly calm, is because of all the grace and love that is overpowering everything around me and surrounding me. I can physically feel the peace and power of everyone's prayers." Then, approximately 1 month after her diagnosis, Maria wrote about this in her poem, which she called Prayer. And this is the poem. "The overwhelming power of prayer, revealed in dark and scary times, when one is blinded by fear and confusion, God's radiant light penetrating throughout, revealed in dark and scary times, providing hope in shining armor, God's radiant light penetrating throughout, swaddling his children in comfort and peace, providing hope in shining armor, as one enters their journey into the depths of the unknown, swaddling his children in comfort and peace, complete trust and faith given to persevere, as one walks their journey into the depths of the unknown. When one is blinded by fear and confusion, complete trust and faith given to persevere, the overwhelming power of prayer." And in early 2019, Maria said this shortly after her diagnosis: "No matter the circumstances of my life, my purpose remains the same. That is to know, love, and serve God. Faith is not an emotion. Emotions rise and fall. Faith is a commitment. I will not despair." And on August 27th, 2019, this is nearly 7 months after her diagnosis, Maria wrote, "I've kind of accepted the fact that maybe I'm sick for a greater purpose, and that's pretty cool. Maybe I'm being used as an instrument to help others find God. In 2020, Maria wrote, "Spend more time in the present moment. That's where God is. Whenever faced with worry, turn to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, especially when you're worried about not getting better. Just look at Jesus' face." And now we're going to go and meet Brian Middleton, Maria's dad. This is the John Henry Weston Show. Stay tuned. Hello, LifeSite friends. Aren't you sick of the cancel culture? Aren't you sick of the overlords at YouTube deciding what you'll be able to see and what you won't? Are you sick of them dictating morality and your use of pronouns? Well, we have had enough. With rampant attacks and continuous censorship we face here at LifeSite News, we've decided to bite the bullet. We are taking video into our own hands and we're playing on our own terms rather than the whims of big tech. We have launched our own video platform. Now we have the ability to showcase our important news and views without the risk of being banned and silenced. Defenders of faith, life, family, and freedom can now speak freely at LifeSite News without censorship from anti-life, anti-family, anti-faith, anti-freedom folks who seem to run all the big tech companies. This, of course, takes tons of hard work and also your support. So we're in the midst of our quarterly spring fundraising campaign, and we are in need of your support, both prayerful and financial. These fundraising campaigns are vital to our survival and the ability to broadcast the truth for free all around the world. So with the launch of our new video platform, we will be incurring many new ongoing expenses due to the size and bandwidth of our servers, the personnel expenses to maintain such a large system, and for new and improved features that we hope to add in the coming months. We must raise our campaign goal of an absolute minimum of $500,000 to continue the fight to withdraw completely from big tech and strengthen our ability to survive in the giant online world. So please donate at the link in the description below. Thank you for your prayers, your support, and your dedication. We are honored to be in this fight with you. May God bless you. Brian Middleton, welcome to the program.
It's good to see you, John Henry. Nice to talk to you again.
Let's begin as we always do at the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. All right, Brian, thank you for joining us. I've wanted to have you on for a long time to talk about really a miracle, which was, I know, much of a heartache for you, but a real miracle. Tell us, if you would, about your daughter Maria, about your family generally, and how this all unfolded.
Well, Maria was a gift in our mid-40s. Susan and I had come together after both experiencing some broken world experiences and had been through a divorce and an annulment, and ourselves at that point really embraced our faith individually before coming together and turned our life over to God. And of course, you know, when you've experienced the broken world, you're humbled quite a bit. And when you search for God, you're asking sometimes for signs that you've been forgiven. You know, it's a two-step process. It's repentance and amendment. We felt that we both journeyed to the point when we came together, we were committed to helping each other grow closer to the Lord. We thought we were beyond childbearing years, and we were wrong. God blessed us with Maria, and Maria was very special from the beginning. In fact, in the beginning, when Susan went to the doctors, when we thought that she was pregnant, the doctor said, "Don't tell anybody, because it doesn't look very good," and so we didn't. And then a week later, we went back, and the doctor did an ultrasound, and I could tell by looking him right in the eyes that he wasn't going to deliver us good news. And just as he was getting ready to turn, he looked at this, and I saw him mouth this out to himself. That wasn't there last time. And it turned out that there was a child that didn't make it, but in place of that was this new child, Maria, that he was never able to explain because there had been ultrasounds done before, and there was no sign that there was a twin there. So we just assumed that he missed it, not knowing who we were about to meet. And Maria, we always would say that Susan brought 2 children into the marriage and I brought 3. We always say that we blended them, but Maria made us family. She very quickly became the glue. When I look at my journal from the day that she was born, the things I used to describe meeting her were just this grace-filled, calm presence. And that's a thing, and I guess a phrase that would define Maria for the rest of her lives. She was very special. She was born that way. It was as if God had basically infused it was like she was born with a PhD in philosophy, theology and psychology. She became the go-to person for her older siblings. The next youngest was, I think, 15 years older than her. But she very quickly became the source of wisdom in our household. It was difficult for me because I realized that I wasn't the smartest person in the house at that point in time, as she began to grow very quickly in age and wisdom. So Maria was, she was nurtured very much by her mom. She attended adoration on Tuesdays with her mom. She would pray at adoration. But Maria, in every other way, was a normal child. She just had this grace. Later, by her spiritual advisor, Kathleen McCarthy, she began to refer to her as God's little vessel of grace. So as Maria grew, she was very normal. One of my favorite Maria quotes in her journal is, "You don't have to be weird to be holy." Maria was a holy person, but she excelled in just about everything. And whether it be her studies or athleticism, but it never really defined her. And as time went on, she just grew into this woman of grace. The other things that I can tell you, her favorite Bible quote from the time she was probably in kindergarten on was the Bible quote about the vine and the branches. And actually, that really, in some ways, described the person that she was. The vine is God, and the branches is the manifestation of God in the human experience. And she was grafted to God very early on in her life. And everything that surrounded her just seemed to be filled with a certain calm and peace and certain mystical qualities. So that's who she was as a child.
And how old was she when she started sort of advising her older siblings and even yourselves?
I can remember when she was 2 and 3 years old, and Susan was cleaning up the house, and she was dusting, and Maria asked her what she was doing, and Susan said, "I'm dusting." And Maria just looked at her pensively, looked at what she was doing, and it says, "It seems to me that you're undusting. You're not putting dust on there, you're taking dust off." And she was always an observer. There was a time when Susan had the flu, and I took Maria out to breakfast, and I said, "Hey, pal, aren't you lucky you have the greatest mom in the world?" And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, do you know all the moms in the world?" And I knew she had me. No, I didn't. Her first, the first Mother's Day card that she ever gave to Susan, it said, "Happy Mother's Day." I think she was 5 years old. It was "Happy Mother's Day to the second best mom," the first mom being Mary. So she had a deep devotion to Mary and to Jesus, and it was almost as if growing up that they were present in her life. She had this familiarity with them that to me was very unique. They weren't mystical creatures from far away. They were very much present in her life from the very beginning. And again, she was great with her older siblings because they were now late teenagers, early 20s. And one of the favorite Maria expressions was she would always, when they were wound up in drama, which Maria didn't have a high tolerance for drama, she would just tell them they had to get over themselves. That was her big line with her siblings. But from the time they started, coming to her when she was 8, 9, 10 years old, our pastor at the time tells stories that he would find himself in conversations with Maria that were deeply based in theological thought. And then he would look at her and realize he was talking to an 8-year-old girl. And he talked about the fact that he felt that in some ways she was his theological peer at that age. So she was and again, I'm saying this, and she liked all the things that every other kid liked too, though. You know, she was exceptional in certain ways, but normal in ways too. There was nothing precocious or pretentious about her. I think, you know, if she was truly humble in the real sense of the word, in that she knew that she was gifted, but she knew that those gifts came from God, and from an early age, she tried to give those gifts back.
As her life unfolded, was there any signs of what came later? So other than, were there any health signs that indicated something was coming?
When she was 6 months old, you know, she had some seizures that we never were able to figure out what they were. And there was initially a very difficult diagnosis that was made, that she would never really grow up, that she would be impaired. And those things went away. You know, there was a lot of prayer at the time, especially Susan praying to St. Joseph for his intercession. And we ended up taking her one time to do an EEG, and the doctor just said, go home. These things will go away. Other than that, Maria was incredibly healthy. I mean, no doctor visits. She was athletic and very healthy. So there wasn't, but when we didn't know of her writings.
Oh, really?
We knew that she kept a journal, but it was private. We never knew it. When we go back and look now, there are certainly indications that Maria knew and had united herself to carry whatever crosses in her life that God would give her. I think to give you an idea, I mean, the Maria story really picks up on January 31st, 2019, when she was diagnosed. She was a great Irish dancer, and she had lost her balance in one of her practices. And so we took her to get her examined and got her tested. And that's when the doctors rushed her to Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, and we received a diagnosis that she had this brain tumor in her brainstem and would reasonably have about 9 months to live. Of course, we gathered around in prayer, and the prayers went crazy. The prayers went all over the place. And then some of the real mystical things really began to happen. The first thing that happened that's noteworthy is that within the Super Bowl was 2 days later. There was a Super Bowl party that our neighbors have all of the time that nobody's really invited to, but you just show up. And so we had our family here for the first half of the Super Bowl. And at halftime, Maria said, "Can we go over to Mr. and Mrs. Krug's house?" And of course, I said, she could have said, will you take me to the moon? And I would have figured out a way to do it. But we went over. And when I was there, my friend Greg said, we have a little surprise for Maria. Again, this was only 2 days after the diagnosis. And he said, it's downstairs. And so we went downstairs. And as I turned the stairway, I saw about 30 good-looking athletic young men between about 18 and 21. And it was the DeSales University lacrosse team. There was a huge teddy bear there, and they had dozens of roses. And as I came around the corner, they said, "We believe in miracles." They had, and Maria was stunned. She was a 16-year-old girl, and suddenly she's got the attention of all these good athletic young men. But in a matter of 2 days, they had gotten permission from their coach and from the school administration to dedicate the season to Maria. It was a beautiful story. It'll make a good movie someday. But needless to say, this was a team that never had a winning record in the history of the school. They dedicated it to Maria. She was the honorary captain. They had her initials on their helmets. They went to mass before every game to say prayers for Maria's health. So the season goes on. They're 5-0, 10-0, 15-0. If they win one more game against the team that wins the championship every year, they win the championship. Well, they lose that game, and it forces a one-game championship. And Maria, when Maria wasn't at the games, they had a big head of Maria made up. When they would score a goal, they would go over to Maria. They would point to Maria and point to heaven and bless themselves. At the championship game, and the team was very good that had forced this game, again, the perennial champions. it was a neck and neck game, and word came up into the stands. They didn't know if Maria was there. And so Maria went down and greeted them at halftime, and they came out at halftime and within 90 seconds scored 3 goals and went on to win a championship. But in more ways than that, she still influences this team is still in touch with us. They all have a great devotion to Maria. Some of them have made career choices. One of them decided to go into the seminary. Another decided to pursue neurology. And the influence that she had on their life was tremendous. But that was the beginning of this 20-month journey where Maria really wrote a masterpiece of a life. And another thing I can tell you about Maria is a couple of weeks after she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, I asked Maria how she was doing. And she said, "Dad, regardless of the circumstances of my life, my mission and purpose remain the same. And it's to know, love, and serve God in this world, and ultimately to be happy with him in heaven." And she said, "My faith, my emotions will rise and fall, but my faith is not an emotion. It's a commitment, and I will not despair." And she began to lead an Advent life. There was suffering and there was joy coexisting in her life. A year later, she wrote in her journal, 2019, "Although it was terrible and great, it was the best year of my life." And many, many stories of her. Was the president of her senior class. And she was asked to speak on Ring Day. And it was a very powerful speech. It was a speech that I don't think was going to make the school's website, because she challenged the children of what was really important, and that they should focus on becoming the person that God created them to be.
In a world where many teenagers struggle to find real meaning and purpose, we know that our purpose in life is to know, love, and serve God so we can all be happy with him in heaven. This understanding calls us to lead others to him through our everyday words and actions. Each day, we all have the opportunity to evangelize our brothers and sisters through our daily encounters.
So there was all of these things. It's hard to capture, John. There were so many things within that first couple of months. We began to be contacted by people all over the world, by Christians who were working in the Middle East. They were living in caves, but they were converting Muslims to Christianity and then escorting them across the border. We have audios of them praying in their Kurdish languages, of asking, for God's help for Maria. We were contacted by a school, St. John Paul Academy in Uganda, and we received a big picture of praying for Maria. And then we began to receive letters, and one of those letters was from a young woman named Patience, who talked about how Maria was inspiring her, and that she really hoped that one day she would meet Maria, but she knew that would never happen. Well, interestingly enough, 9 months later, on the anniversary of the day that they told Maria that she had an expiration date, Maria was landing in Uganda for a mission trip, and influencing people not only at the school but throughout the jungle, to see the way that people were drawn to her. Again, she was connected to the vine, and there was just it was almost as if she became so one with the Lord, because she truly offered herself as a sacrifice, her body, her pain, her suffering. She intentionally offered it to God, and he was using her to transform lives. We traveled all over. Obviously, as her dad, I was going to look for every possible human way that might, intercede medically on her behalf. And everywhere she went, she had the same. She was transforming the hospitals that she was staying in. As time went on, again, our big thing with all of the doctors was, you can have a diagnosis, but God will have the prognosis. We lived with hope, John Henry, every day. We prayed for a miracle and we expected a miracle. And some people would say, well, you didn't get the miracle that you expected, but we got many, many miracles. We got the miracles that God wanted us to get through Maria, miracles of relationships, healing, people coming to the Lord, many people coming to the Lord. We had two priests who came to us and said that they were contemplating leaving their vocation, and when they met Maria and experienced what they experienced in Maria's presence, that they realized that they were going to recommit themselves to their vocation. So there's an awful lot that I could talk about and continue to talk about Maria.
Her pain, though, was real. What was that like? What did she go through?
Well, I mean, she December of 19, when she began to have more severe symptoms. But Maria never complained about it. She just offered it up. In fact, on Good Friday of 2020, at noon, we thought we were going to lose Maria. She began having difficulty breathing. She began having secretions, and we gathered the family, and we got her Kathleen McCarthy, her spiritual advisor, and we prayed at her bedside. And shortly after 3:00, she came out of what she was in, and she said to us, God will be here soon, either for the miracle or to take me home. And she said, but in the meantime, let's continue to save souls. It was by the way, the next day, a couple of people had asked us if they could do a drive-by for people to just give their support to Maria. And we were thinking a couple of people would come by, and this made national news. We live in the country, and so this was an unusual occurrence, but over 500 vehicles of all kinds showed up and drove through our driveway here to say, give Maria their best. It was an amazing thing. I guess it was in June, Maria began to decline, and
how old is she at this point?
She's 17. She entered the hospital, Doylestown Hospital, and that was where we lived as a family for almost 5 months. But John Henry, the transformation of that hospital, the administrators to this day talk about it. Long after the agnostic physicians would say that Maria's life was worth living, the quality of Maria's life was worth living, she was transforming hearts and souls. She was leading people to Jesus and to eternity. The hospital room became a chapel, and her bed became an altar of sacrifice. People would actually take their breaks and come to Maria's room, and they would pray. We had people praying. It was almost, all night people would come in. The maintenance staff would come in. At some point, the hospital administrator himself came in to see what was going on. There was just this transformational experience, the conversations that played. We had, I jokingly say this, that it became almost like a Monty Python skit in all of the clerical people and the robed people who would come and visit Maria. One of the really special experiences was with Father Jim Blount came to visit her. And when he came in, he was praying. And he began to see things, which he has that gift, and he began to name. He gives the angels and the saints are ministering to Maria. They're here with Maria, and he started to name saints. Maria Goretti, the kids from Fatima, Saint Joan of Arc was there, who Maria had a great devotion to. Carlo Acutis was there, and named they were the young saints. He said the young saints are here. And he said, Maria is a suffering soul who has offered herself to save, he goes, thousands of souls of teenage children in the worst of places. And after he left, Maria was at the point where she couldn't hear, but she could see, and we communicated with a whiteboard, and she would move her one eye up and down for yes and no. And so Susan listed the saints. I guess there was a little bit of skepticism. We were just looking to confirm. And Susan put a few placebo saints on there, a couple extras that Father Blount didn't see. And Maria said yes to every saint he said, and no to every saint that we put on there. And again, there was so much going on. We had, she wrote a letter to the Archbishop of Philadelphia when the poor Archbishop Perez, his first week on the job was COVID. So when they closed the churches, Maria, I remember it vividly. It was 8:30 on a Saturday night, and she sent an email to him and communicated this thought that does it take someone in her situation who's lost the false security of a long life to remind you that the only thing that we have to fear is the absence of the Lord, and that people in her situation need the Eucharist and they need the sacraments. And within 15 minutes, he responded and said, "Have your parents call me. I will bring you the Eucharist personally." And he did, and they created a friendship, a beautiful friendship that he entailed him communicating with her. They became friends, and he came to visit her in the hospital to ask for her prayers. And from what I know, continued. He told us, that his whole career he's had 5 prayer partners that he prays to, intercessors in heaven. And when Maria passed away, he said, "I now have 6." So there was so much. There'll be more about this, because the director of communications at the hospital, they was so intrigued by what went on that when he retired soon after Maria passed away, and asked us if he could write a book about her final 20 months, to really try and understand what was taking place and what everybody experienced there. And it continues, John Henry. I'm not even capturing an ounce of the whole story. There's her funeral, which took place in COVID, when everything was shut down and nobody was coming, was at the Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Doylestown. We had 5.5 hours of viewing one night and had to stop it. And then the next day we had 3.5 and had to stop it. Thousands and thousands of people came through. Thousands of people came to the funeral. There were 13 priests on the altar of Maria's funeral, and we hadn't invited them. We invited, I think, three or four to participate. And if you see that, because it's online, and it's still being viewed, there are thousands of people that have viewed it. It was as if it was really as if God was pulling back the veil for everyone to see of what it is like when you truly unite your life to Him. It's difficult for me to still say that Maria died, because it was almost as if she walked us to eternal life with her, and we got a glimpse of it. Again, long after people would say the quality of her life was worth living, she was introducing us to this world of the unknowable, and she lived in that world her whole life quietly. Like she never limited her experience to that of her own understanding. She was always willing to step into the world of the unknowable. And when she was diagnosed, we had conversations about the fact that people, this is God's call, and there is so much unknowable about an all-knowing God, and so much that's unknowable about medicine. I mean, if you look at the slice of human knowledge in the pie of eternal knowledge, we know nothing. And when what is known is offering us no hope, we find our hope in the unknown. And that's what Maria taught us, is that we limit ourselves to those things. There's so much mystery and so much awe in our faith that if we embrace it, we can live with hope. We can live with joy regardless of the suffering of our circumstances. The interesting thing is, I told you about the journal, right? The first journal we found, Maria was probably 10 or 11 when we found this first journal. Because actually people were saying Maria's going to be a saint, and I would say, well, saints have to have writings. There's got to be some way to put together the story, and we had no idea. And then Susan started finding like this depth of stuff from the time she was 6 and 7, 8 years old. But the first journal that Susan uncovered, it began at 8 or 9, and her first journal entry was God is merciful. And the last journal entry, this was her last journal, and her writing had declined because she was losing her physical abilities. Again, think of this: the class president, the great athlete, the #1 student in her class, an all-star Irish dancer. She was lost. God took away all of these temporal skills, and the final message that she was able to communicate via the written word was think hope. And Maria meant hope eternal. It wasn't mere optimism. And people would say, well, break that down. How can that happen? And I can tell you from knowing Maria and from reading Maria's journals that there is a duplicative formula for the way that Maria led her life. Because Maria, when push came to shove, there's 4 takeaways. One is that when we're faced with something that's beyond our control, or we're faced with suffering, the ultimate in human dignity is that we get to control our attitude over those things over which we have no control. And Maria chose hope. She chose faith, and she chose love at a time that most people wouldn't be able to make that decision. Now, again, did she make that decision then? No, she made that decision years earlier when she decided to basically turn her life over to the Lord, when she decided that to be with the Lord was to embrace the suffering and the crosses that would come across your life. But she chose that attitude when she told me, I will not despair, I will choose hope. Maria, you think about the despair that plagues the world, and it's because people don't know who they are. They don't know what their identity is. Well, we won't go down that rabbit trail, but that's a big issue. And that's why people are despairing. Maria knew at her core, her whole identity was that Maria was a child of God. That's what she was. And she knew why she existed. And she existed to know, love, and serve God in this world, and ultimately to be happy with him in heaven, regardless of the circumstances. And Maria knew what she valued. She valued faith. She valued family. She valued freedom. She valued truth, beauty, and goodness. And she lived out that life. So when the negative things came in her life, she had a rudder that was able to propel her. And that's a message that needs to just continue. That's the legacy of Maria. Know who you are, know why you exist, and know what you value. We live in a lost world, John Henry, and I see so many children that are lost, and yet here's a young woman diagnosed with a terminal illness who writes a masterpiece in the last 20 months of her life. And again, the story continues. We don't go a week without hearing from somebody that we don't know who's in relationship with Maria, who's praying for Maria's intercession. We hear stories of people who are claiming miracles. They're not verifiable miracles, but they talk about relationships healing. They talk about physical healings. We're constantly being asked for us, to pray to our daughter. Again, we know Maria's a saint because saints are in heaven, but if Maria's ever an official saint, the big takeaway I want everybody to take away is that sainthood is not genetic, John Henry. It doesn't come. We're not the Martin family. We're just normal folks. So these things continue to happen. I mean, to the extent that where Maria's final resting place is the Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa, and they've told us that it's the most visited grave site they've ever had, to the extent they've asked if they could put a display of information up about Maria, because they have people coming to the monastery all the time asking where Maria is buried. And it just continues.
What is, for you, some of the most memorable writings that you've read of Maria's writing?
I think some of them, she wrote one about transubstantiation when she was in 7th grade. That it's actually the best thing I've ever read about transubstantiation. And she wrestled with it. She wrestled with, is it cannibalism? Is it symbolic? And it came to to her own conclusion based on her worldly experience. And she studied the miracles, the Eucharistic miracles, that it really was the body, blood, soul, and divinity of God. But not only that, it was his heart. And she came to the conclusion that it is both real, substantive, and symbolic because of what a heart stands for. And that's why he chose it. That's certainly one one of the ones that stands out for me. It's funny because we're going through so many, and just when I come up with one that I think is the one that nails it, I love she's written a lot of stuff about offering, herself as a sacrifice. I mean, things that she understood suffering at an early age. And she writes about some of the suffering, that she's experienced.
Well, that is something that is sort of universal, but a lot of people right now are feeling their suffering in huge ways. It's for a lot of people right now, overwhelming. What is some of the best advice that she has with regard to suffering?
One of the things that she did was that she united herself and her suffering with God. She saw it as her journey. She loved St. Joan of Arc. St. Joan of Arc, she dressed as St. Joan of Arc when she was little when they would have to do things at school. And she wrote one time that she knew that God would have her in battle, but that the battle would be spiritual. And so there was when you tie that to her vine and branches, Maria always was able to control her attitude and unite herself to Christ, even when she was struggling with normal kid things like computer usage or cell phone usage, or she would always articulate the problem in a very common secular teenage way, and then she would work her way to uniting herself to the Lord. She would always end up there, and I think that's such a great message. She understood that she wasn't born for this world more than anybody that I ever met, and so she didn't necessarily see suffering as any kind of a punishment. She saw it as the reason that she was born, and I think it's the only explanation for her ability to unite it so closely to the Lord.
Some of you may remember, or perhaps even newly appreciate, the late Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. He is considered one of the greatest communicators in the modern era and stands as a great example for all of us in what it means to work in Catholic broadcasting. For over 50 years, Sheen captivated audience on both radio and television, and millions tuned in each week to hear his messages of hope and encouragement. One of LifeSite's supporters is Radio Maria, and they are now proud to be showcasing some of Bishop Sheen's timeless recordings on their weekly radio show entitled Bishop Sheen Presents. Please consider tuning in to Radio Maria on Friday afternoons at 2 p.m. Central or Saturdays at 5 p.m. to enjoy the Venerable Archbishop's wit and wisdom. For more information on Radio Maria and their Catholic work, please visit their website, radiomaria.us. That's radiomaria.us. And now, back to the program. Another one of those areas that's very difficult for people nowadays is the whole concept of hope. Hope, not only even hope in the proper way. So she recognized she was a child of God. Her hope was heaven, but even that's hard. A lot of people are living in lives that are full of sin and wonder about their own salvation. And then there's the whole concept of being despairing of just the way things are in your life. What was her message of hope?
Her message of hope was that if you live a life of serving God by serving others, if you live a self-transcendent life, that you will have not only eternal joy, but joy in your life. There's some things that she wrote about hope and about truth, that she understood that happiness is not a momentary pleasure. She was very countercultural and had an awareness of the secular view of a lot of things. She could see that people pursuing momentary pleasures were not happy people. But she also had a firm understanding. She has a good classical education from the academy that she attended in grade school, and had a foundation of understanding the role of virtue, and that true joy comes from pursuing virtue. And true joy comes from being self-transcendent and not narcissistic. And those were really the way, it's the way that she led her life, by pursuing virtue. And she understood this. I don't know if, some of it is stuff that she learned from us, some of it she learned in school. But when you eliminate the concept of objective truth, you eliminate objective good. And when you eliminate objective good, you eliminate the potential for true happiness, because true joy and happiness comes from pursuing virtue, which is defined as the firm disposition towards that which is good. And Maria just understood that. And she understood it at a very pragmatic level. It was like, she didn't understand why people, would do things other than that, because the joy that she experienced along with her suffering was all very palpable. Again, when people are coming, the hospital people would tell us, everybody avoids. You got a 17, 18-year-old girl who's in bad shape and is dying. Everybody avoids that room, but yet everybody came to that room. They would argue over who was going to be Maria's night nurse, because they wanted to be in the presence. There was a glow, a transfiguring kind of glow that was in that room. We had a priest come to visit us, who was asked by a friend to come and visit us, and this was the Saturday before Maria was called home. And he told us later, he came and he was looking at his watch, and he was there to give Maria a blessing. And again, 3 hours later, we're still sitting there, and he couldn't leave. And he canceled his dinner plans, and he later spoke about it. He gave a beautiful homily about what he experienced in that room. And he said it was like the ultimate retreat. There was a mystical priest, Father Monsignor Essa, explained to us that at one point, Maria had become so one with the Lord that there was no real separation, and that what people were feeling was the Lord's presence within her. And I had never experienced it before either, but there was just this overwhelming sense of grace and peace, and still is, by the way, with everything that's associated with Maria. When you lose a child, there is this emotional and psychological loss that's just overwhelming, but it's counterbalanced by this incredible spiritual joy that we feel, in the present tense. We didn't love Maria. We love Maria. We didn't have a relationship with Maria. We have a relationship with Maria. Maria has now gone on to her eternal reward because she's earned it. We still don't. There was, going into 2021, it was New Year's Day, and I'm sitting at my table and I'm crying, and I said, I don't want to move on without her. And I heard her voice, and Maria had she could be a little bit sarcastic in a good way. And she says, "You're not moving on. I moved on. You got to catch up." And it's the kind of thing that she would have said to me. And I heard it clearly. And it's almost as if, what we feel now with this foundation, we didn't start. Friends of ours said, "We're going to start a foundation. Do you want to be a part of it?" It was pretty difficult to say no to. It was centered around Maria. And we feel that we're being directed now. It's all, we kid about it. It's like Maria got a big promotion, and now we're working for her. It's sort of what it feels like, John. But there's so much, there's just so much here, and so much continuing to unfold about Maria's story.
Indeed. Well, let's have a look at Maria. If you can set this clip up for us.
As I mentioned before, we connected a relationship with this school in Uganda. And we didn't really know what to expect, but we decided to go there, and Maria was all for it. And there was these multiple experiences with people in the jungle and some of the kids at the school, where you can just see the absolute joy there between the school children and then just some of the people that she was meeting in the jungle. And you can see here how they were just drawn to her, and how she just waded right in, prayed with them, and there was just this love, that you could feel, and this radiance. When Maria was diagnosed, the prayers just came. And John Henry, literally, and I know you've experienced this too. The power of prayer can be overwhelming because there was no explanation for some of the strength that we all felt during those initial phases. And there were times when we literally could feel grace flowing into us. I can't explain what it feels like, but I never felt it before. And I knew it was something different. And the only explanation I could come up with was that it was grace. And Maria really felt this too. And this is, she spoke about this. In addition to that, she wrote a prayer about the power of prayer, which is now being circulated all over.
Oh, would you read that to us, or has she read it herself?
I will read it to you right now. So this was about a month and a half after Maria was diagnosed, and we began to experience all of the prayer that we were going that was being sent to us. And this is a prayer that Maria wrote. The overwhelming power of prayer, revealed in dark and scary times when one is blinded by fear and confusion. God's radiant light penetrating throughout. Revealed in dark and scary times, providing hope in shining armor. God's radiant light penetrating throughout, swaddling his children in comfort and peace. Providing hope in shining armor as one enters their journey into the depths of the unknown. Swaddling his children in comfort and peace. Complete trust and faith given to persevere. As one walks their journey into the depths of the unknown, when one is blinded by fear and confusion, complete trust and faith given to persevere, the overwhelming power of prayer.
Beautiful.
It is. You know, there's another quote that I just thought of, and it came probably 6 months into her journey, where she talks about how scary it can be, but that her overwhelming sense and feeling is that of gratitude for the life that she's been given and for the people in her life. And she talked about how important it is that we live in the present, that grace is only available to us in the present, and that if we stay in the present, all will be well. It is hard. She was 16 when she wrote that. And it's just, it's difficult to imagine facing what she was facing. And genuinely, truly, in her journal, this wasn't a public statement. You know, this wasn't a false self. This was what she was really feeling, just this overwhelming gratitude for the life that she'd been given.
Brian, thank you for sharing with us. Give us some final thoughts, but we really want to know, too, where people can find out more about your foundation and about Maria.
Well, again, we were approached by friends of ours to create a foundation, and it's called thinkhope.org, and it can be found at thinkhope.org. And the purpose of our foundation is really to reach people who are on the continuum of despair. There's a continuum from early childhood education to the end of life suffering. And what Think Hope is all about is supporting those organizations that bring hope to despairing situations. So good Catholic education, nothing like it. Maria had that. Maria knew who she was, why she was born, and what she valued. That is so critical in this world where people are just so confused. They have no meaning and purpose. They have no sense of community. So from the early stage, it's supporting Catholic education and a lot of classical kind of education. The other thing that we're doing is looking at the teenage years where people get lost in all of these identities that don't sustain them. In fact, they bring despair, and a lot of it is generated through social media. Then there's a part in the despair world where nothing works and people fall into despair. And so organizations that are helping them. And then, of course, the end of life. We also have a focus on actually bringing hope into businesses through our consulting practice, which is our for-profit of turning businesses into communities of hope. So the focus is raising money and finding organizations that are ministering to people in despair. and using our network of people to help support those industries. As you know, John, Henry, there are a lot of great people out there that are doing God's work that, don't have networks or don't have the ability to raise money for them. And we're hoping to do that. And that, again, you can find that at thinkhope.org. Maria's story is still beginning. She lived a life on this planet worthy of adulation and adoration, but just such a great example in this world of despair. We need harbingers of hope. We need people that we can look up to who know how to bring hope into the world. I think, again, I think the four components of Maria's life are messages that we have to get out there: choosing your attitude over those things over which you have no control. Who are you? Why do I exist? And what do I value? We lack meaning and purpose. Children lack, people our age, I see it all the time. They lack meaning and purpose, and therefore they're victims of despair. The big messages that we want to get out there is that we are in a battle with the devil. Maria understood that, and she understood that it was a battle of worldviews. She understood that her Christian worldview, was the antidote to the human secular worldview, a world of relativism and basically setting people up to disappear into a black hole of nothing at some point in time. When Maria was diagnosed, she knew what her destiny was, and her hope was in her faith. Her hope was, she understood that regardless of the circumstances, and we prayed for a miracle every day, John Henry, we prayed and we expected it. But God gave us the grace to endure it all one day at a time, led by our little vessel of grace, Maria. And I know that, that it was very intentional that those were her last words. I know that she could see her friends and even her family members sinking into despair. And the one thing that she wanted us to have was her faith and her understanding that she was okay.
Absolutely beautiful. Brian, thank you so very much for sharing with us your beautiful daughter.
Thanks, John.
And
thank you.
God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you too, John Henry. Look forward to seeing you again sometime.
And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. This is John Henry Weston. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSite News. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.